exactly what you said. That's comforted me multiple times in my life, because I do feel like we get in the way sometimes. Like we think we're like super smart and we can explain things better than Spirit. We can't. But it gave me comfort on my mission, and it's given me comfort since that I'm not in charge.
All right, welcome to another episode of The Best Mission Stories. Thank you all for joining. I'm your host, Will Bozeman, Elder Bozeman, for all of you watching the show here. I have a great guest. We'll introduce him in just a moment. I do want to remind everyone who's watching and listening, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, comments, or if you have an awesome mission story that you want to talk about, you want to share, reach out to me. Contact information is on the show description. Happy to get you on the show, talk about your mission as well, and hear those stories. So, all right, today's guest, we got. I'm going to call you Elder Hamilton. All right, it's Aaron Hamilton, but it's Elder Hamilton here on the show. I hope that's okay to bring that name back to reality here. So
I would be honored. I wish I could wear that name every day.
I feel the same way. Well, okay, so. I'll let you do an introduction. Tell us, where you served, when you served, and then, let's hear that. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So, like Will said, I am Aaron Hamilton. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and live in Arizona. I served in the Dominican Republic, the Santo Domingo East Mission, and it was 2000 to 2001 that I was down there. So, an amazing part of my life, and happy to share all about it with y'all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. Yeah. So obviously people serve all over the world, and the Dominican Republic, also known as the DR, right? Is that pretty common to call it the DR?
Yeah. You hear that most common. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, you served there, and in full disclosure, Aaron and I know each other before the show. So I've heard you talk about the DR all the time. It apparently holds a very special place in your heart, probably a lot like most people's missions. But if you wouldn't mind, tell everybody a little bit about what it's like serving a mission in the DR. And if you could think while you're talking about that, maybe start thinking about, are there any particular people or events or something that you would define as your mission? If you were to look back on your whole mission and have one event or story or something that you remember most that defines the mission, if you wouldn't mind talking about that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I would be happy to. And if you indulge me, I'll kind of give a little bit of context and background and stuff. Like we're going to get a peek into how my mind works and how I put thoughts together. But the mission was a special time for me, life-changing in ways that I don't think I ever understood going into it by any means, which is common. You hear that it's like, you feel that it's the next step or the thing that you're supposed to do. You hear the prophet talk about, all worthy young men should go out and serve the Lord. And so for me, it almost felt like a cliff. Like it was like my life up until the mission, and then I had no idea what was after. Like I didn't even really kind of plan. Like I thought about careers and, obviously I wanted to come back and have a family and all the things that you have in life's journey. But for me, I was like singularly like, that's the next milestone. After I graduate high school, I need to prepare and go and serve the Lord. I had two older brothers that had served missions. One was served in Poland, in Warsaw, Poland, and one in Korea. I'm not going to say the name with the proper accent, but Tajin, Korea. And so when I was getting ready to serve my mission, it was a really kind of special time in my life because my parents were both converts to the church and had joined through interactions with missionaries themselves as a young couple. And so that feeling of kind of the importance of missionary work and people finding the gospel was in our home. And even more special to me was, my dad passed away when I was 9 years old and never got to serve a mission. And so I had two families really in my extended family that were members of our faith. and my aunt, Margel, and her family, she had found the gospel through falling in love with a young man named Owen in Utah, and she joined the faith. My dad and her were raised Southern Baptist. My mom was raised in the Catholic faith, and so I had this kind of missionary legacy in the family that just made it like known to me in my heart that I wanted to do that and share and bring that to other people. And so both my Uncle Owen married my Aunt Margel, and he didn't serve a mission because they got married early and before he had the chance to do that. My parents had joined the church. They didn't get a chance to do that. And both of them were like, when we're older, we'll serve as couples. You know, all these years later, my Uncle Owen passed before he was able to serve as an older missionary couple because of his wife had some health issues and he was helping with her, and then life just happened and he wasn't able to serve. And then my dad passed from cancer young and he didn't get to serve. So I saw those examples even at a young age, and I'm like, I got to take advantage. I got to do this. I got to serve a mission. And my older brothers were, you know, examples to me and going out and doing that too. And so that helped. So got my call, opened it, read that it was to the Dominican Republic. This is pre-internet, so you can start to do some calculations on how old I am. But I was like, Dominican Republic, like republic, like is that in Africa? Like that's where the countries that have republic in the name are.
Right, yeah.
Republic of Congo and stuff like that.
Yep.
I didn't really know. I didn't even know that the best baseball players in the world were from the Dominican Republic yet. That was to be found out. But I went to an encyclopedia with maps.
Nice.
I opened it up and I started looking, and I was like, oh, I'm going to the Caribbean. And that was interesting because leading up to my mission, I put in my papers and I had a dream. And I'm not like a real dreamer. Like I don't have a lot of dreams that I remember. But this one was really vivid from a feeling perspective. And all I felt was I was on my mission. I was walking down the streets. I couldn't really tell the particulars. Like it wasn't like visual. It was a feeling. And I felt like I was on an island. That's all I felt.
Wow.
And I felt like I was surrounded by water, and I was on on the streets walking, serving, and then I woke up. And this was probably 2 weeks before I opened my call. And
wow.
I went and I told my mom, I'm like, I think I'm going to go to an island. And she said, really, like where? And I said, I don't know, maybe like Tonga or Samoa or something like that. I didn't know. And then I open it up. I don't know where the DR is. I go to the encyclopedia. I see it's in the Caribbean, and it's an island. And it's the Hispaniola Island that's shared with Haiti. And I'm going to be Spanish speaking and go there, which was cool too, because my brother was in Europe, in Poland. My other brother was in Asia and in Korea, and now I was going to a third continent. Just in my little family, we were going to go to 3 different continents in the world, speaking 3 different languages. And that to me was a cool representation of how far-flung the gospel is and the opportunity, how we were going to be able to share it in every corner of the world. And so I started to get really excited. I knew 0 Spanish. I took French in high school. I was bad at French. But interestingly enough, half the island is Haiti, who speaks French. So okay. I did get to interact with some Haitians and butcher my French and probably offend them or say the wrong things, but I think they appreciated the effort. Yeah, that was the call. And it was really special. I couldn't have asked for a better place. I had no idea where I was going. And when I got the call, I kind of immediately felt like it was inspired.
That's amazing. And I love that. And I would imagine it would be really nice for everybody to have that inspiration about where they're going. But I know, and most people just don't get that. It's always like, oh my gosh, it's a complete surprise, you know? But that's really cool that you had a dream about it. I love that. So, okay, you get there and you're learning Spanish, obviously. Did you do MTC? Did you go to MTC here in the US, or did they have a different one down there? Or
since that time, the MTC program, I think, has gotten more developed. And I honestly don't know exactly how it's all set up. I know there's different MTCs in different parts of the world now. And Sometimes I think people go directly to those foreign MTCs outside the United States. Sometimes they do like a split of
Right.
part-time in Provo or in Utah and then elsewhere. I think it depends on where you're going, what language you're speaking, and so on. My experience was I went directly to the Provo MTC, which was the main missionary training center at that time, to learn both more about teaching and the discussions and gospel, as well as the language, the Spanish language. The interesting thing was a lot of people in my group knew some Spanish. Some of them were pretty good, actually. And so there was all different levels of language proficiency. That was very anxiety ridden for some of us. I honestly was just probably naive and optimistic enough that I'm like, I'll figure it out. And I had a brother that had learned Polish. I had a brother that had learned Korean. Funny enough, like my first call home a few months later, whenever it was, I think it was Mother's Day, my brothers were on the phone and I said, hey, you know, I'm still struggling with the language a little bit and trying to figure things out. Like, how long did it take you all to learn Polish and Korean? And they were like, never. Like, I was on the plane home and I didn't feel like I knew the language. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, hopefully that's not my experience. They did say they're on. I think Spanish is, you know, more realistic and easier to pick up. Yeah. But yeah, we went to the Provo MTC, went through the language training program. By the time we left, I knew enough to stumble my way through some common phrases, to kind of maneuver through, you know, getting a taxi and, you know, those things. I mostly knew gospel language, Spanish. But my teachers, I had 3 teachers in the MTC that were teaching Spanish. One was an American who had served in South America. I think he had served in Chile. One was from Mexico City, so he was a native Mexican speaker of Spanish, which was awesome because he knew it from his roots and was just super fluent. Right. And then one had served, another American who had served in Spain. But those are 3 different, very different types of Spanish.
Right.
And the 4th type is Caribbean Dominican Spanish, which is very fast, a lot of slang. They've got their own dialect. They have strong accents. And so you learn this kind of formal school type Spanish. You get down to the island and you're like, wait, where did all that go? Like I have to start over kind of. Yeah. You knew the basics and the conjugations and everything, but you had to really get immersed and adopt the local dialect, the local language. And so when I learned that even more when I came home and I started speaking to people in Spanish in Arizona, which has a heavy, you know, Mexican population. And they were like, where did you learn Spanish? Like, your Spanish is ugly. And they, you know, they're saying this to me in Spanish. And I'm like, oh, I learned in the Caribbean and the Dominican Republic. And they're like, yeah, I can tell. Like, your Spanish is ugly. And I was like, oh man, I got kind of discouraged there. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to turn this into a profession, but that was a bit about my kind of language training in the MTC and how it translated into the work.
Well, that's great. I imagine. So, I mean, obviously there's some of the benefit. I feel like some of the benefit that comes from not really knowing the language is ultimately having to depend on the Spirit for pretty much everything. So I've heard that from other people. I mean, it's a pretty common theme is that the less prepared you are, or the less, you know, what do you call it, perfect you are, the more the Spirit can actually work with you. So, you know, so yeah, tell us, I mean, maybe if you have some interesting situations where, you know, your proficiency in Spanish did not shine, but the rest of you did.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience to the others that you've talked to about that. And I've shared that with my kids. And I think it's applicable to a lot of things in life. Like, we'll get callings in the church that we don't feel ready for. I don't know how many times I haven't felt ready to be a dad. You know, like I've been trying to deal with situations, or a husband, all the roles that we play. I think we're constantly being humbled, and that humility in that moment turns you to Heavenly Father and the Spirit, because you have nothing else. Like, and that can be it can be a really special moment if you let it be, to be guided and comforted. And that was definitely the case, exactly how you explained it. I remember being discouraged and being with companions that were more senior in the mission, had more tenure, and were better at Spanish than I was. And we would go to teach and interact with the people, and they would, turn to me as great training elders would and be like, okay, like this is your part, like, go ahead and teach. And I always had this pit in my stomach, like I'm going to mess this up, and the Spirit's here, and I'm going to ruin it. And I remember this one instance. I was probably two or 2.5 months into the mission, something like that, and we were teaching a family. It was in the evening, and I remember, because I can remember it being by candlelight, which was pretty common in some of the areas we served, where there either wasn't electricity or the electricity was constantly going out because the infrastructure just wasn't good in a third world country like that. The lights would go out, electricity would leave probably 8 or 10 times a day at least, sometimes for most of the day. The light was gone. In fact, in my mission journal, I wrote at the top on the inside cover, don't ever take running water and light and electricity for granted again, because I didn't want to forget that opportunity, that blessing. Yeah. And
yeah,
I have a thought on that. You're going to regret inviting me to your podcast, by the way. I'm going to talk forever, and you're going to be
like, that's fine. This is great. I love it. Keep going. You're going
to have 20-minute episodes, and then this one's like 4 hours long.
Well, you asked me how long is it going to take, and I was like, it depends on how much fun we're having and how many stories you have. It could take hours, but no, please go ahead.
Yeah, turn this one into a five episode series, and hopefully it's valuable in some form. But so I wrote I just, on that note, since you reminded me, if you don't mind me kind of snaking through this story, but I wrote, don't ever take light and water for granted. And just, I have the opportunity now to be a priest advisor for my calling. So I get to be with the priests and see them as they prepare to go on missions. And I was sharing with them last year when I was teaching a lesson, like, that hit me just recently in the last couple of years. I was looking at my mission journals, which I'll do from time to time, reading the stories and thinking about that special time. And when I read that, I was like, I was thinking about the light and water literally, like running water and light. And I read it again, and I was like, that's Christ, like he's the light, he's the water, and I was saying, don't ever take that light and water for granted. And how often do I take Christ for granted in my life, And so that was just like a really special, like I was teaching myself what was important 20 something years later, after getting back from my mission. And it was, I didn't even know what I was writing at the time. But so that was kind of a special kind of spiritual experience just with my own journals. And kind of a testimony of keeping journals, because you can continue to learn from them, just like we learn from the scriptures throughout our lives. And so back to the story that you asked about. I was sitting there, and I was reading from the discussion booklet, which was more formal back then. Now it's more loose and open discussion. And so I was reading from the discussion booklet, and I was reading from some scriptures, talking about something in the lesson. And I was thinking in my mind, my Spanish is so bad right now. Like I feel like my accent is off. I wonder if they understand me, was going on in my internal script in my mind. And I was looking down, trying to read in the candlelight. And I looked up, and the family like had tears in their eyes, because the Spirit was so strong from the message that we were sharing. And I was like, I remember thinking, I'm like, I have nothing to do with this teaching. Like I'm literally just sharing a message that the Spirit is going to teach them. I'm just here to be a little instrument in that whole part. And it doesn't matter if my language is bad. I just need to open my mouth, because the Spirit will do the rest. And it really did hit strong in that moment. And I saw the tears in their eyes, and I was like, wow, the gospel's true,
You make it. I've got tears in my eyes. No, thank you. That is. I love that. I mean, I've had some similar scenarios, but not in another language. But even just with English, where
Yeah.
I didn't think that the person was really getting it. And I oftentimes feel the need to explain it. Oh, I'm going to elaborate a little bit so that you understand because you don't seem to understand. But they did feel it and understand it. I just couldn't tell. And yes, sometimes there were tears because of that. But it's funny because like, you were just thinking to yourself, I don't know what I'm even saying right or not. But the spirit, I mean, yeah, you're right. You have to be there for the spirit to actually be there. And it doesn't matter if you're saying all the words wrong, and the spirit's there, and that's what does the actual, conversion. That's where they feel the spirit. That's where they know that Christ is the center of this message, right? And I love that. Yes. Okay.
That
All right.
was exactly what you said. That's comforted me multiple times in my life because I do feel like we get in the way sometimes. Like we think we're like super smart and we can explain things better than the spirit. We can't. But it gave me comfort on my mission, and it's given me comfort since that I'm not in charge, and I'm not the one that's gonna be in charge of the conversion of anyone to the gospel of Jesus Christ. The Spirit does that. I can invite, I can teach, I can try to bring my spirit or testify of what I found to be true, but the conversion happens. And it brought me so much comfort. And I tell that to my priests when I'm interacting with them in my calling, like, don't feel like you need to be a genius and know the scriptures back and forth. Don't feel like you need to be perfect at the language or the lessons or whatever. Like, you're not in charge of that. You prepare, you do your best, and it's so comforting to go and give Moroni's promise and say, now you get to go to Heavenly Father and ask him if this is true. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to give you a gift that I've received, and I hope that you can find out the same, but go to him, ask him.
You're absolutely right. And that's in many occasions myself as a missionary, and even since then, since I've been home, talking to people who were interested in the church, and it's almost like the less I say and do, the better the outcome is. I mean, you can't logically convince someone about anything, especially when it comes to the gospel. You can't use evidence, logic, or intelligence to try and, I mean, like, you might convince them of, like, hey, oh, okay, it sounds like you sound very smart. Maybe some of that stuff is correct, but that doesn't convert people,
Right.
and, the Spirit does. And I love what you're saying there. So you're teaching, young men to go on a mission. So
Yeah.
some of these experiences from your missions probably, obviously weighing in on that. And just like you said, the light and the water story is a huge example. Just you brought up something a second ago, just the journal. Just keeping that journal on a mission is huge. And you go back through it and remember all the stories. And I've talked about journals for years. And nowadays, you hear people talking about, outside the church, talk about a journal as a way to, what do you call it? To handle your life and handle stress, and, as like an outlet or something, like, oh, just journal as an outlet, and I'm all like, no, well, I guess, yes. But like, you journal it to tell your story, to remember it forever, immortalize your feeling. And I've had people ask me about that before too. And I will tell them, I'm like, you think you'll remember it because you're there right now. You think you'll remember that forever, but you won't. And, if you write it down, you can at least remember the day, the story of what happened, and the rest of it can come back to you. If you don't write it down, where are you going to get that, And I love that thought, and I love the feeling that, you keep this journal. So everybody's listening, if you haven't started a mission yet, like, you absolutely need to keep a mission journal. Write down everything that you think and feel as you go. And, it'll come back. It'll come back to benefit you later. And of course, Elder Hamilton and Elder Bozeman will be gone one day, but their kids and other posterity will read those journal stories, right?
Yeah.
You'll have that too. That's another aspect of why you keep a journal, just so that, everybody else can read about what you did, right? And hopefully they'll watch a video about it now here.
I was going to say that this is a journal. This is a journal.
Exactly.
Right here.
Yeah, sure is.
You're making journals come to life.
Yeah, yeah, and that's and I love this. See, this has been it's been so much fun to actually just hear all the stories people have about this. I often tell people one of the things that is it's fun when missionaries come home and then they give their their welcome home talk
Yeah.
at their ward. They typically only have like 10 or 15 minutes at best, maybe 15, maybe 20 minutes at best to tell 2 years worth of experiences. And I'm always all like, I can always tell that they've shortened the story, they truncated it, to fit into a couple minutes. And there's a lot more to it, and I'm like, this is such a great chance for people to actually, tell a more detailed version of what they remember from the mission.
Yeah.
So you had, I'm sure you probably had quite a bit of success, lots of people that were interested. Any type of situation that I don't know, I guess would be like surprising for you. And people tend to have some surprising interests, surprising converts, things like that. Anything like that with you?
Yeah, yeah. There's a few that came to mind, but I'll share the one that was kind of the most impactful, or the one that really stood out for me when you invited me to come and chat. So it was halfway through my mission, or just before halfway, and I remember that for two reasons. One, the Santo Domingo temple had recently just been completed. And they were preparing to dedicate it, and they had actually built an MTC next to the temple for elders and sisters that were coming to serve in the Caribbean, as well as areas around the West Indies, the Caribbean islands, northern Venezuela, like that whole kind of area. Like if you were going to serve there, you would come to the Dominican Republic MTC. I think that structure has since changed, actually. I don't think they're using that area as an MTC anymore. I think they've moved it around as the church evolves and grows. But the temple was getting ready to get dedicated, and that plays into the story. And so I remember that. And I also was training a new elder at the time. And so I was a little bit further on, coming to closer to halfway in my mission. And I got to be with an elder named Elder Larson from Utah, who was one of my favorite people to be with, and really, has left an impact on my life. We actually got to talk about this story fairly recently, which is a blessing that I'll share as part of it too. So we were in our area. Again, now he was the younger elder who was trying to learn Spanish. I was the senior elder training and taking on more of the load of the conversations and teaching and such. And that was wonderful. And so we're in this area, and with the MTC opening next to the temple, there was one of the things that the new elders that were training would do is they would go to the park near the temple in downtown Santo Domingo, and they would practice proselyting and practice their language skills. And so I don't know how he got hooked up with it, but there was a gentleman that became kind of their regular taxi driver. He drove like a minivan taxi, and he would take the elders and sisters back and forth to the park every day as they went and they met Dominicans and talked to them and practiced their Spanish. He would wait for them, and then he would take them back to the MTC. And so his name was Antonio, and one of the days, an elder in the MTC group had the spirit and was on fire and excited. And so they're on the way to the park, and he, in his broken Spanish, actually leaned forward to Antonio and said, "Do you want to be taught?" Because if they did get any referrals in the park, they would write them down, and then they would send them out to the areas where the elders and sisters were serving, and we would try to find the people and teach them if they were interested. Yeah. And you can imagine, so he leans forward and he asks Antonio, he's like, "Antonio, you take us every day. Like, would you like the elders to come?" And Antonio's like, "Sure, yeah, they can come by my house. That's fine." And so this new elder that's in the MTC tries to write down his address, and it was so almost I couldn't understand anything that was on the paper. Like it was like yellow house, tree, behind store, one part of the street name. And I was like, we get this in our area. And I look at my companion, I'm like, there's no way we're going to find this guy. And so like it was so hard, and the addresses were hard in the Dominican Republic in general because it was a third world country and it's not extremely organized. Sometimes there's like streets behind streets behind streets that
Gotcha.
don't have names and things like that, and so that you take a dirt path and you follow it and you pass the mango tree and take a left and stuff like that. And so we had it in our bag, but we weren't really trying very hard to find him. And not because we didn't want to. We knew that it was going to take a while. And so we had other appointments and things that we were doing. But we had a lull in our schedule one day and we pulled it out and we said, let's go try to find Antonio and see if we can figure this out. So we knew the general area. We went over and we just started talking to people and asking them like, hey, do you know a taxi driver named Antonio? And so like people were like, nah, I don't know him or whatever. And then finally this guy's like, yeah, I know Antonio. And so he walked us back and we went back into this alleyway and we found the house. And so we go up, we knock, and Antonio opens the door, that was a blessing in and of itself because he was such a hard worker. He was constantly working. He
Yep.
was a great provider for his family, but he would work constantly. And so we talked to him. He walks up and his two young sons walk up and they were young at that time, probably I would say 9 and 11 or something like that. And so we introduced ourselves and he was like, yeah, come on in. Like he was with the elders and sisters every single day. Super friendly, great guy, super nice to talk to. But we see behind him his wife and she didn't seem quite as happy to see us. And so she was like hesitant, like giving us a look like, what are you all doing in my house? And she ends up walking up as we're talking to him, introducing ourselves and says, hey, he can't get baptized if you're going to expect me to get baptized. It's like, if this is like a family thing, I have my church. I go to church every Sunday. Antonio doesn't really come with me because he's working and other things, but I have mine. And if we need to get it together, I'm not getting baptized. So you're wasting your time. And we just said, hey, like we are not here to like start anything between a family by any means, but we also don't require that everyone in the family listen or is taught. Like it's an individual process, an individual decision. And Antonio was kind of like, hey, just let him teach, like let him talk to me and stuff like that. And so we were sensitive that we don't want to drive a rift in the family, but Antonio was all about it. And she kind of got to a point where she's like, fine, you can teach him, but I'm not listening. And we were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And so we ended up sitting down and teaching him the first discussion and talking through it with him. She was like a room away, not a very big home, but like, far enough away that she didn't want to be there, like kind of back to us type thing, and reading a magazine or reading a book or something. And so we did the first discussion, we did the second, and every time we came back, he and his sons would sit and listen to us, and his wife would get a little bit closer. She still had her back to us. She was still acted like she was doing other stuff. She was doing the dishes or sewing or, whatever. And like, would kind of like listen in, like, what are you teaching my husband? I got to make sure that I can tell him what's wrong about what you're teaching him tonight after you leave, But Antonio, he was very receptive and just a wonderful guy. And so we got to the point where we were inviting him to be baptized. And we did, and he accepted. And she was kind of like I said, if this makes him happy, he needs Christ in his life more. So if he's going to actually do it, like he can do that, but I'm not doing it. I'm not being baptized. And we're like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And so the day comes, he gets baptized. One of his sons gets baptized, and then the other son a little bit later. And his wife attends, but, makes it clear that she's, has her own church, that type of thing. And so it's just a beautiful moment, and an amazing guy, and so spiritual, in feeling the Spirit strong when he gets baptized, and his son, and then his other son later. I leave the area and I move on, and I'm going to other areas on the island, new companionships, things like that. And about 8 months later, I get a call, and it was the elders in that area, and they said, she wants to get baptized. We've been visiting Antonio. He's doing great. And she's decided that she wants to be together as a family, and she wants to get baptized. And so she asked if you would come back and you would do it. And
Wow.
so I was just like, oh my gosh, the spirit hit her, like it worked on her. I think she saw the change that it had in Antonio's life. He stopped working on Sundays whenever he could because his taxi business was demanding, but he dedicated himself to the gospel, and he was happy and focused and really kind of making a better life for him and his sons and his family, and being a better husband and a better dad. And I think that's true of all of us when we really accept Christ into our lives and make that change. And so I went back and I got to baptize her, and that was probably one of the most spiritual experiences I had ever had in my mission. And what all these years later, the reason why Elder Larson and I interacted recently was because he reached out to me and said, I got to share something with you. What my former bishop in my ward in Utah is on a mission now as an elderly mission couple, an elder mission couple, and he's an IT professional, and he goes around to the temples and he sets up the audio visual kind of IT systems in the temples, and he's been in the Santo Domingo temple upgrading their systems and helping them. And he has a taxi driver, and it's Antonio. And so he sits down with him, and all these years later, Antonio's like, yeah, the elders that baptized me, Elder Hamilton and Elder Larson, and his Elder Larson's former bishop was like, wait, they're Jared Larson, like he was in my ward, like, and they made the connection. And so through that connection, I didn't know if Antonio was still strong in the faith. That was one of the things about serving in a third world country where not everyone had a phone. Letters were really hard. We didn't really have emails set up. I didn't set up my email address until after my mission. And so it was hard to keep in contact as much as I wanted to. And so I always wondered like how he was doing. And so I had this blessing just in the last year of Elder Larson reaching out and said, Antonio's doing great. In fact, his sons have both served missions. Wow. And have left the Dominican Republic to go serve in Bolivia and serve the Lord. And he sent us some pictures of him and his grown sons. They're married now. They've served missions, and the family was all there, happy to this day. That was just like such a sweet blessing, especially as my daughter Piper was getting ready to put in her mission papers and get her mission call just recently, and she leaves here in November coming up. So I felt like the blessings of my mission never end, and like the lessons I learned while I was there, but to know that the gospel lives on and is strong. And so, yeah, that's a story that came to my mind, and one that is blessing me even to this day.
No, I love that. I love that. And, you don't really get to see everybody later. I mean, you don't always get to, I've often wondered whatever happened. Here we are in the U.S. with, all the communication possible, and I still don't keep up with everybody. I don't know what's going on. And, occasionally I'll hear something, right? It's a few families that I've kept in touch with, but, I tell you, I visited the mission once, with one of my companions when we were right after the missions, like a year after, both in college, had like a few weeks free, back when you could do stuff like that, without having 1,000 obligations in your life, and we just took off and just drove back up to the mission. And we were only there for maybe 3 or 4 days or whatnot, but went to church on Sunday at one of the wards, and a kid that was like 9 or 10 years old when we were there that we had baptized, he served us the sacrament. And it was really cool to see that. It was like, you don't get a lot of, you don't get a lot of vision into what happens after you leave. And just seeing him pass the sacrament. This is, something that I think a lot of people don't expect either. You think that they remember you because you remember them. that doesn't always work that way. In
Yeah.
this case, he looked at me like he was confused. And I was like, we're the
Yeah.
ones who are mad at you, man. He was like, oh, okay, nice. Yeah, okay, yeah. He totally didn't even hardly remember us. I mean, it had only been like 2 years. And anyways, but that's just, for in that case, it was really cool though to see it. But I mean, look
It's
at,
That's an interesting. Can I make a comment on what you just said? Because I
yeah,
thought a
sure,
lot
yeah.
about that too. Like, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like, I kind of want them to forget me because, like it wasn't me. Like sometimes you get worried that they may have like felt the spirit and mistaken it for like friendship because
Right.
like, you and I are gonna leave. Like that's not the gospel. Like we love them and we hope that they found a friendship and a love for us. Like I have a love for the Dominican people to this day that like I get choked up sometimes just thinking about how much you can love people that you don't know personally on a personal level, but in general because you're called to serve but like I would leave and I'm like I hope that their testimony is not based on me, and so it's a double-edged sword because you're kind of like, oh, like that was such a special moment to me. Like I'll never forget that night or that time period. But at the same time, you're like, I hope that it's rooted in something else, something deeper,
Yes.
you know?
You're exactly right. And I think what my trainer taught me, a really valuable lesson. Elder Richens, if you ever are seeing this, and yeah, if you ever see this, reach out to me and we can talk. But he basically trained me and said, look, you don't want, he said, a lot of people, because you teach them, they'll think that they want you to baptize them. When they do get baptized, they'll ask you to. And he was all like, and sometimes that's fine. He was like, but really, he was like, if you really want to leave them with a really strong connection to the church that they just joined, he was like, you see if one of the people that they've gotten to know in the ward will baptize
Yeah.
them, and that's the person who then baptizes them because you're leaving, and when you're gone, you're gone. They're not going to
Yeah.
have a relationship with you after, and I mean, but obviously there's a lot of there's a lot of people that want the missionary that taught them to baptize them. It's very normal. And if somebody asked for that, you don't just turn them down. And
Yeah.
whenever it happened, we would say, who would you like to baptize you? Anybody from the ward is going to be anybody that from church will be very happy to baptize you. But if they say, well, I want you to baptize, I want you, elder. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. We
Yeah.
always would offer to let somebody else do it so that they have that connection. But there's going to be a few people that do remember you obviously really well. You'll never forget them. And but just knowing that that his sons ended up going on missions, and they got married, they got sealed, they had families. And if you trace it all the way back, was the one thing that the one elder that just asked him, "Hey, would you like to be taught?" And like you
Yeah.
said, he saw how many elders and sisters did he see every day? I mean,
Yeah.
like, or all he was driving them everywhere all the time, but no one ever asked him, you
Yeah.
know? And
And I don't even know that elder's name. Like that's the thing. I had this special experience with him, but I hope Antonio like had a beautiful memory of him too, because to your point, he was the brave one that planted the seed, and I got to see the fruits of it. But I don't know if he even knows how far it went from just opening his mouth. Like we really don't know, and things progress and become that they're in Heavenly Father's hands. They're not in ours, and that's beautiful. And you won't see it sometimes until the other side, and
yeah,
that's okay.
I know I get that too, and I've had many. I've had many, daydreams where I imagine what all happened to the people that I knew, and
Yeah,
I've had, I was blessed on my very first week in the mission. So I went to the MTC like normal, but it was English speaking U.S. mission in Spokane, Washington. So, I was only in MTC for, 20 or 21 days, like a 3-week cycle, and that was it. And first week in the mission, my very first day in the mission field, I mean, very first day, we got there like halfway through the day, having been picked up and driven to the apartment. And then that night we had we taught it was four brothers who wanted to join the church, and it was all four of them, and their mom was a member. It was a single mom, four teenage sons, and they basically, as a group of sons, they decided that they would honor their mom, and that they would all decide to be good and go to church. And they would go to their mom's, church. It was really crazy. It's like, like four teenage boys who, if you ever, I mean, I got some pictures. Maybe I should post a picture, but they were like, they were, I don't know what the right word is, but they were like very masculine, very masculine. I mean, they took care of their mom, their single mom. They're
Yeah.
all, really strong and independent. And but the one thing that they all loved was their mom. And I taught all of them, and it was so funny that because of how strong and independent they were, they would they took the lessons really seriously. They would like lean in, and they would like look at me while I was talking. They were like, okay, okay, like they were really studying. It was crazy. Like I've never seen anybody like study it. But then when I discovered kind of why, they're like, well, we're learning about this because our mom grew up in the church, and she's been our single mom, with no dad our whole life.
Yeah.
And so, it really was like, I'm going to honor the legacy of my mom and our family, and I'm going to learn about this church. And so they were like studying it while we were teaching the lesson. And then three of the brothers got baptized, and the one, he held out because he was all like, he's like, well, I'm not going to just get baptized because everybody else is doing it. And this is literally what I'm not, so just because they do it doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but I do want to do it in like 2 weeks. Can we wait 2 weeks? It's like, okay, yes. And he was like, okay, good. So he just had to be independent. And I
Yeah.
have a picture with all four of the brothers, three of them in baptismal whites, and the one that wasn't. And then later on, there's another picture of just him. It's like he couldn't be a follower. It was really
Yeah.
funny. But I mean, like, that I often wonder what happened to them, right? But the family, the family, effort that they put in was really. I used to think about that all the time. It's like four teenage boys that didn't grow up in the church, out doing whatever they want all the time, and all of them deciding to give up at such a young age, give up all of the crazy pulls of the world in every direction. I'll give that up so that they can actually do something that honored their mom like that. And it was
Beautiful.
and then again, like, how many of them ended up going on missions? I don't know. Did they go on missions? Are they still in the church? I don't know. It'd be really nice to find that out. It's really cool and really awesome that you got to see what happened down the road to them. And you're right, it comes full circle, and it's really special. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
It was a beautiful blessing. Yeah, it's another thing I'll share briefly if I can just take a couple more minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
just visually for me, it was visually and spiritually, it was really powerful. In my last area, it was an area called Los Frailes, and it was like near the ocean. There was like these volcanic kind of cliff rocks that went down into the ocean. It wasn't a traditional beach, but it went, and then you came into the area, and then it dipped down, and like it was like below sea level and everything like that. And so when you came to our area, you went down this kind of steep dirt hill and drove down for a little bit, and then our apartment area was down there. And so that was my final area. I was getting picked up by the office elders to go back and drop my bags off and prepare to go home. And I remember, getting ready and everything, and they picked me up, and they had a little pickup truck with 4 doors, and I sat in the back seat and threw my luggage in the back, and said goodbye to my companion and the folks that I lived with, and they were driving me up. And I don't think we were talking much. I think they were kind of respecting the moment of just reflection and everything. And I remember I was sitting in the back seat with my arm on the bench, and I turned around and I just looked out the back window of the truck, and I looked on my area, and the perspective was we were driving up this hill. And so like I could literally see the whole area. And the area it was just my last one. I served in a handful. I think I would have to count again. It was like 8 or 9 different areas, I believe, in my mission. But this was the last one, and I was looking back, and I just all I could think of was the people that I had taught and the good times, the good things, the stories, the feelings, and all the hard days, which there were many, where things fell through, things didn't work out. I got dengue fever for a while, like all of the stuff, like all the things that you can imagine, the hardships and just the tough times over a 2-year period, and missing my family and being homesick and everything else. It all melted away, and all that was left was the relationships, the connections, the spirit that I felt, and the love that I had for this people that I didn't even know where they were when I got my call. And I opened that encyclopedia and saw they were in the middle of the ocean, waiting for me to come and be with them. That sounds like I was like some important person coming there, but like
you were.
they were there, and I got to be with them. That in their home, in their land, and that was just such a special moment, because like it was the last area, but that it encapsulated all my areas. And I just imagine that that's kind of how life is going to be when we're at the end, is that you've got all these bumps, you've got all these challenges and trials that you go through, but all the stuff just melts away. And what's left is the relationships, the connections, the spirit, and the ability to kind of serve and be with each other. And that's the stuff that really matters. And so I share that with my kids, because I'm like, I don't want to sugarcoat that a mission's easy. It's hard. It's hard emotionally. It's hard physically. All of the above. You're gonna be humbled in a way that you probably can't imagine going into it. You're a little bit naive, a little bit blind to the hard stuff, which is okay. That actually gets you through the first part so that you can learn and gain momentum and get going. But it's indescribable as you look back on it, and you can't imagine not have doing it. And there's rarely a day that goes by that I don't think about my mission and how it changed me and changed my perspective on life. So yeah, that came to my mind too when you reached out, is like that moment when I was looking back out that back window of that truck, and just how beautiful that experience was. And I got home again. I don't have very many dreams, but I had a dream, and I've actually told this to a couple people, and there's been a few people that have said I had something similar. But I was home for a few days, and I went to sleep, and I had a dream that I woke up in my dream, and I went downstairs, and there was another mission call on my kitchen table. There was a letter from the prophet, and it said, "We need you to go back out for another 2 years." I'd only been home for, like I said, like probably less than a week, three or 4 days. And I wasn't blind to how hard it was going to be this second time. And so I remember sitting down in my dream and being like, oh, can I do another 2 years? Like, that was hard, But I thought about, again, those relationships and the good things, the good parts, and all the blessings. And in my dream, I was like, I'll do it. I'll go back. And then I woke up, and like, I was like, was that a test? Was that a test to like for me to appreciate that it was all worth it, and that I would do it again if I was asked? And the answer is yes. And so that's something that I'll always stick with me.
Now you're making me cry. I often told myself if I could go back, I would have gone back. There's so many things that got left undone. I had to. When you get called to new areas, you have to leave people behind. You hand them off to another missionary and hope that missionary takes them seriously, and like I don't necessarily have the same. I like the way you're describing when you left and you look back over it, and if you feel like you're looking at not just the location, you're looking at 2 years.
Yeah,
you're driving up a hill and you're looking at 2 years in the rearview mirror, and it's yeah, and it goes so fast. Like I tell everybody, I'm like, it's just 2 years, and then when you're on the front end of it, you're like, oh my gosh, it's 2 years. Think of all the fun I could have in 2 years if I stay home. But
Yeah.
on the back end of it, you're just like, it was only 2 years. Where'd it go?
Yeah.
It's all like, let me stay, let me stay. And I had many dreams after I got home too, that I was still on the mission. Um, you know, um, and I often thought if I could go back, I would. And when you get home and you get into regular life, I mean, you got all these goals and ambitions and all that stuff is great. And all of that stuff felt so. I mean, the going to school and working. This is before you have a family and kids and everything. But when you're just going to school and working, all that stuff just felt so trivial compared to just being able to serve the Lord's people
Yeah.
and see the Spirit at work. And I delivered pizza while I was in college, and and like and I went to class, and it's like compared to compare that to serving full time as a mission. I would give that stuff up any day to go back. You know,
100%. Yeah.
and none of that stuff. I mean, it was so hard coming back and thinking what I'm doing is I'm just earning money and I'm just getting an education on paper too. It's like all these things could wait. Let
Yeah.
me go back and serve more. I want to go back. And you can't do that though. And one thing that I do appreciate is the effort that the church places on everyone to be a missionary now. Still do it. Still engage in being a missionary the rest of your life. And I appreciate that. And I've had many great experiences after the mission, but there's nothing like having that your full life is dedicated. I mean, like you literally, live, eat, sleep, drink, live, you live that mission for 2 years. And all you have to care about in the whole world is serving those people right now. And that's it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else. And I love that feeling and I miss that feeling.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Your story brings back a lot of good memories of that. So okay. Thank you for those. I know we are going long on the show. Is there anything else that you want to talk about or share before we wrap it up?
I mean, the only thing that the only thing that comes to mind, and I think we could probably kind of close out with this is, um, so and you and I have talked about this on a personal level. I've been able to go back to the Dominican Republic a couple times in service capacities as part of this humanitarian experience, HXP, with my kids. They happen to go to the Dominican Republic, so with my two older kids that are older teenagers, I've been able to go back and be back with the Dominican people and experience some of that love again. It's different when you're not a missionary and you're in a different capacity, but it is still is service oriented and it was beautiful and so that was a really great experience. Part of those experiences, we interact with the local congregations and with the elders and sisters that are serving there now. We go out in the areas with them and teach lessons and visit families, and that was just so special. And so that's been recent blessings in the last few years here. But one of the times, and this is about missions kind of more in general, I'm as a priest advisor, I'm thinking like, I hope a priest that's thinking about whether they should serve is watching this, And so the thought that came to my mind is like these two elders, we were talking to them at one of the events and one of them said, hey, you served here and you served a mission. Like, what advice would you give us? And one of them was just a couple months from going home. The other one was, earlier on in his mission. And the thing that came to my mind is advice that somebody had given me early on of, really 2 years can seem like a long time as a full-time missionary. And to your point, we're missionaries for the rest of our lives. We don't wear the plaque, but we get the opportunity to represent Christ and take his name when we get baptized and when we're members of the church. But in that special time when you're a full-time missionary, like 2 years can seem daunting. And And so somebody told me, like, take every single day, one day at a time, where you open every day telling Heavenly Father that you're going to do your best and your fullest that day. And you close every day apologizing for what you could have done better. Maybe you didn't follow the Spirit to go down this one path or talk to this one person. You were scared, or, the mistake you might have made, or whatever it was. Like, apologize and say, tomorrow I'm going to be the best version, and mean it. And if you do that every single day, then it doesn't feel like 2 years is so long, because you're doing it one day at a time, and you string together a bunch of one day promises to Heavenly Father that you're going to do your best that day, and you sincerely mean it. And when you're able to look back on it, you will have no regrets. There's a saying that somebody told me when I was going on my mission, and it was a little bit maybe hokey, but they said, you've got 2 years to serve, and you've got the rest of your life to think about it. And you don't want to spend the rest of your life thinking about regrets, And that stuck with me. And that's the advice that I would give to anyone that's going out on a mission, is string together one day at a time. Don't think about the 2 years or the 1.5 years, 18 months. If you're a sister, missionary, like, take it on an individual by individual basis, individual days, individual relationships, one person, one family at a time. And you're going to look back and have an amazing experience where you took advantage of every single day, and you have zero regrets, because you have the rest of your life and eternity to look back on it and think on the blessings that it came together. So that's the advice that I would give and probably leave with is, and it's a lesson that I think we can apply to our everyday lives. Like, sometimes I feel like Satan wants us to think so huge that we get overwhelmed and do nothing. Like, think big as far as like the eternities, and act small as far as the one-on-one interactions. Because when you read in the scriptures, like, that's how Christ interacted with people. It was on a one-on-one basis. It was individual. It was him sometimes getting on his knees with them or looking them in the eye. The same mentality will lead to a really fruitful mission, is like, don't look past what you have right in front of you. Take it one day at a time, and you're going to look back and have some amazing experiences. So that's the advice that I would give.
That is wonderful advice. Wonderful advice. I look, I know we've got to wrap it up, but I will say, anybody who is listening or watching the show, that I'd say that last advice you gave is probably one of the most important things you can consider going into a mission, is that right there. Take it one day at a time and do the best you can each day. Wow. Hey, this has been a really spiritual session today, or show today. I'm sorry, my mind's still wandering on the mission. It's like I can hardly think about what to say next, and I'm still trying to think about some of the things you just brought up on the stories in the past. And so I greatly appreciate you being on the show, and I greatly appreciate you sharing personal and spiritual stories with some of these people that you met and the people you served. And hey, who knows, if you come back down the road and you've got a handful more stories that you can think up with, we can get you back on and talk about those as well.
Would love to. It's been a blessing. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So for all of you watching, you're watching The Best Mission Stories. And if you have a question about missions and stories, or anything of the guests or anything of the sort, reach out to us. Contact information is on the show description. And if you happen to have a great story and you want to share that, reach out to us, and I'd be happy to get you on the show. Elder Hamilton, thank you for being on the show today. And I'm your host, Elder Bozeman, and we'll see you next time on The Best Mission Stories.